Adriano Ferraro bought the entire restaurant at 8:40 p.m. for one reason: to fire the waitress who had thrown a glass of red wine in his face 1 hour earlier. He signed the papers on the hood of his black car in the rain, without reading them twice, because men like Adriano did not need to read twice. He owned the building by the time the wine had dried on his collar. He walked back through the front doors of Marchetti's the way a storm walks into a quiet street. The hostess went pale. A busboy dropped a tray. Somewhere near the kitchen, a woman with tired eyes and a stained apron stood very still, already knowing the man in the doorway had come to erase her. Her name was Nora Vitale. She was 29 years old, and she had exactly $4 in her checking account, one child asleep in a booth in the back, and no idea that the man she had humiliated in front of 40 guests was about to become the most important person in her life, or the most dangerous. Adriano crossed the floor. Every table went silent. He stopped in front of her, water still dripping from his dark hair, and he opened his mouth to say the 4 words he had rehearsed in the car. "You no longer work here." He never got to say them, because at exactly that moment, a small figure slipped out from under table 9, a 4-year-old boy with dark hair and a red toy car clutched in one fist, and ran straight across the floor. He did not run to his mother. He ran to Adriano. He wrapped both arms around the man's leg, looked up with enormous certain eyes, and said the one word Adriano Ferraro had spent his entire life absolutely sure he would never hear: "Dad." The restaurant stopped breathing. Nora's tray slipped from her hands and hit the floor, and Adriano Ferraro, the man 3 cities feared, the man who had buried rivals and never flinched, stood frozen with a child holding his leg. And in the boy's other hand, catching the light, was a small brass cufflink shaped like a lion. His lion, the Ferraro crest, the one he had lost 4 years ago, on a night he had told no one about. "My name is Nora Vitale, and I'm telling you all of this now after everything happened, from the same city where one thrown glass of wine changed every life it touched. Mine, my son's, and the life of a man everyone believed had no heart left to change." What Leo said that night, and what Adriano was holding in his eyes when he looked down at that cufflink, is the reason I still can't tell this story without my hands shaking. So if you want to know how a waitress with $4 ended up standing between a mafia boss and the truth he had buried, watch this story all the way to the end. Subscribe to the channel so the next part finds you. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from right now. I read everyone. To understand that boy and that word and that lion in his little hand, I have to take you back. Not 4 hours, 4 years. To a storm, a blackout, and a stranger I was never supposed to see again. I was not born into money, protection, or luck. I was born above a laundromat on a street where the buses ran late and the heat ran out first. My mother folded other people's clothes until her spine curved. My father was a name on a birthday card that stopped arriving when I was 7. We were not rich, but we were never cheap with each other. My mother taught me one thing before the cancer took her voice. Dignity is the one thing poor people have to hold tighter than money. Because money leaves in a bad month, and dignity has to survive every month after. 4 years before that restaurant, I was 25 and working the night desk at a small hotel by the water the kind with a flickering sign and a lobby that smelled of rain and old carpet. It was the night of the worst storm the city had seen in a decade. The power went out at 11:40. The elevators died. The phones died. And a man walked in, out of the flood in a black coat that cost more than I made in a year, with blood on his knuckles and calm in his eyes like the storm, was something that happened to other people. He asked for a room. I told him the card machines were down. He put cash on the counter without counting it. And then the roof over the east wing gave a sound like a groan, and the whole building went dark, and for reasons I still cannot fully explain, that stranger and I spent the longest night of my life talking by candlelight in a dead lobby while the sky came apart outside. He never told me his real name. I never gave him mine. He said he was leaving the country before dawn and might not come back. There was a sadness in him so deep it had gone quiet, the way a wound goes quiet when it stops being new. And somewhere in that dark, two people who had both decided love was not for them held onto each other for one night, as if the storm might be the last honest thing either of us ever felt. We talked about small things and enormous ones. He asked me what I would do if money were not a wall, and I told him I would open a little place by the water where tired people could eat something warm, and no one would look at their shoes. He did not laugh. He looked at me like a man reading a language he had forgotten he could speak. He told me his father was a hard man and that he had spent his whole life being sharpened into a weapon he never asked to be. I told him weapons could be melted back down into other things. He said, "Not the ones like me." I said, "Everyone thinks that at 3 a.m. And for 1 second, the frightening calm slipped off his face, and I saw how young he really was underneath it, and how tired, and how alone. By morning, he was gone. He left cash on the pillow I did not touch, and one small thing that had fallen from his sleeve in the dark, a heavy brass cufflink shaped like a lion. Catching the gray dawn light, I meant to run after him. The lobby was already full of firemen and shouting. He was already a black coat disappearing into a black car. And I was left holding a lion and a night I could never explain to anyone. 6 weeks later, in the bathroom of that same hotel, I looked at a test with 2 lines on it and understood that the storm had not left me empty after all. It had left me a son. I named him Leo, my little lion. I gave him everything I had, which was not much, and I gave him one thing more, the brass cufflink, when he was old enough not to swallow it, because he cried without it, and because some foolish part of me wanted him to carry one honest thing from the father he would never meet. He called it his shiny. He slept with it. He carried it in his fist to daycare, to the bus, to the back booth of every restaurant that would let a single mother keep her child near while she worked a double. For 4 years, it was just the 2 of us. I waited tables. I skipped meals so he wouldn't. I learned to smile when I could not afford to cry. And I never, not once, imagined that the stranger from the storm had a name the whole city whispered, or that the lion on my son's cufflink was the crest of the most feared family in 3 states. Now let me bring you back to that night at the restaurant, 1 hour before the wine. Marchetti's was the nicest place I had ever been allowed to work. White tablecloths, a piano, wine that cost more than my rent. I had the job for 3 months and I guarded it like a life raft because Leo needed shoes and winter was coming and the landlord had already knocked twice. That evening the owner, Mr. Marchetti, was sweating through his suit because a private party had taken the whole East Room, investors, men in dark suits who did not laugh. At the center of it all sat a man I had never seen, but the whole staff spoke about in half whispers. Ferraro, Adriano Ferraro. Don't look at him too long. Don't spill anything. Don't exist too loudly. I did not know his face. I only knew he was the reason the kitchen was terrified, and the reason my hands shook carrying the wine. Here is what I did not know, and would learn too late. At the next table, hidden among the guests, sat a man named Salvatore Greco, Adriano's oldest rival, a snake in a good suit, invited by someone who wanted the two of them to break bread and pretend at peace. Greco had spent the evening testing Adriano, smiling, needling, waiting for the cold man to slip. And when I came to pour the wine, Greco saw an opportunity smaller than a waitress and used it. As I leaned to fill Adriano's glass, Greco's foot slid out beneath the table and caught my ankle. I stumbled. I tried to save the bottle. I could not save the glass. Half a pour of deep red wine went across the front of Adriano Ferraro's white shirt and up the side of his jaw. The whole room inhaled. I have replayed the next 4 seconds more times than I can count. Because in the story everyone told afterward, the waitress threw wine in the Mafia boss's face. What actually happened is that a powerful man tripped a poor woman to embarrass an enemy, and the poor woman took the fall, because that is what the world does. It lets the small one carry the crime. Adriano did not shout. That was the terrifying part. He set down his fork. He wiped his jaw with one slow motion of a white napkin, and he looked at me. Not with rage, with something colder, something that had learned long ago that rage was a luxury and control was a weapon. He said only, "Get her out of my sight." Mr. Marchetti nearly fainted apologizing. I was pulled into the back. I did not cry in front of them. I saved it for the walk-in freezer. 60 seconds, hand over my mouth, and then I fixed my face and went back to work because Leo was asleep in booth 9 at the back, and a mother does not get to fall apart on the clock. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought I would simply be fired quietly, given my last envelope, sent home. I did not understand yet who I had spilled wine on. I did not understand that a man like Adriano Ferraro does not fire a waitress. He buys the building she stands in. He was gone for 1 hour, long enough for me to believe it was over, long enough for the party to thin, and then the front doors opened like weather and he was back, wet from the rain, papers in his coat, and every table went silent again. He crossed the floor toward me, and I understood with total clarity that this man had gone out into the storm and bought Marchetti's, bought the tablecloths, the piano, the wine, the walls, the job that fed my son, so that he could take it from me with his own hands. That is what money is when a man has that much of it. It is the ability to make a small woman's whole world into something he can end on a whim. He stopped in front of me. Water dripped from his hair onto the floor between us. His eyes were the color of a river under ice. He opened his mouth, and Leo woke up. I will never know what made him wake at that exact moment. Maybe the silence. Maybe some thread between a child and a father that no science has ever named. He climbed down from booth 9, rubbing his eyes, his red toy car in one hand and his shiny in the other, and he looked across that terrible silent room, and out of every adult standing there, he chose the one man in the doorway, the tall one, the frightening one, the one dripping rain, and his whole small face opened up with a joy I had never once given him a reason for. He ran, barefoot across the marble, and before I could move, before I could breathe, he wrapped both arms around Adriano Ferraro's leg, tipped his head all the way back, and said it. "Dad, you came," as if he had been waiting his whole life, as if he had always known that one day the man from the storm would walk back in out of the rain. The tray left my hands. I heard it hit the floor from very far away. Adriano did not move. He looked down at the child gripping his leg like the world depended on it, and I watched something happen to his face that I do not think anyone in that room had ever seen happen to it before. The ice cracked. Just a hairline. Just enough. And then his eyes found the small brass object in Leo's fist, the lion, his lion. The one that had fallen from his sleeve 4 years ago in a dead hotel lobby, on a night he had told no living soul about. I saw him recognize it. I saw the math begin behind his eyes. 4 years, a child, a face, a storm. And I saw the exact instant the most controlled man in the city lost control of the one thing he had always kept, his certainty about who he was. He looked up from the cufflink. He looked at me, and in a voice so quiet only I could hear it, he said, "Nora?" He knew my name. He had never known my name. He had read it 1 hour ago on the papers he signed to destroy me. He did not leave. Of course he did not leave. He cleared the restaurant with 3 words to a man by the door. The investors filed out fast, their eyes down, and Salvatore Greco went last, but Greco was smiling as he went, and he let his gaze rest on Leo for 1 second too long, and something in my stomach turned to ice. A man like that files a child's face away. A man like that keeps it for later. Then it was just us. Me, Adriano, Leo, and old Tomas the cook, who refused to leave the kitchen doorway drying the same clean pan over and over. Because Tomas had known me for 3 months and had decided somewhere in there that he was not going to let a mafia boss be alone in a room with me and my boy. Bless that old man. He is in this story until the end. Adriano knelt. It was the strangest thing I ever saw. That tall, terrible man folding down onto one knee on the wet marble to be level with a 4-year-old. "Where did you get this?" he asked Leo, gentle in a way that clearly cost him something. "It's my shiny," Leo said. "Mama gave it. It's a lion like me." He held it up proudly. "You want it back?" Adriano's jaw moved once. "No," he said. "It's yours. Keep it." Then he stood, and he was not gentle anymore. He turned to me, and the ice was back, but now there was a fracture running through it that would not close. 4 years ago, he said, the hotel by the water, the storm. It was not a question. You never told me your name. I never told you mine. You never came back, I said. My voice did not shake. I made sure of that. I couldn't. 2 words, and a weight behind them I did not yet understand. He looked at Leo. He looked at me. And he asked the question every part of me had spent 4 years dreading. How old is he? 4, I said, in March. The whole room seemed to tilt. Tomas stopped drying the pan. Adriano did not shout. I have to keep telling you that, because it is the frightening truth of him. The more it mattered, the quieter he became. He simply stood there and did the arithmetic that any man could do, and I watched him arrive at the answer, and I watched the answer land on him like a building. "He's mine," he said. "He's mine," I said back, and there was steel in it, 4 years of it. "I raised him on tips and skipped dinners while you were wherever men like you go. Whatever you think you just found tonight. I have been carrying it alone since before he was born." He was quiet for a long moment. Rain ran down the windows. Then he said something that told me exactly how dangerous the next days were going to be. "If Greco understood what he just saw," Adriano said slowly, "then by morning, half the men who want me dead will know I have a son, and a son is the one thing they can reach that I cannot armor." He looked at Leo, asleep-eyed again against a chair. "You have been safe for 4 years because you were invisible. As of 10 minutes ago, you are not." That was the ticking clock, not a hospital, not a wedding. A clock made of enemies, and it had started the second, my son, said Dad. But here is the part I did not tell you yet. The part that changed everything about how I saw the man I thought had abandoned me. And what he confessed, standing in that empty restaurant at midnight, is the reason I stopped hating him. Stay with me. He made us leave with him that night, not by force, though he could have. By logic I could not argue with. Greco had seen Leo's face. My apartment was a single lock on a thin door. His house was a fortress. I hated it. I went anyway, because a mother measures pride against her child's safety, and pride always loses. In the car, Leo fell asleep across both our laps, his shiny in his fist, and Adriano finally told me where he had been for 4 years. That night in the storm, he said, he had been running. His father had just died. The empire had fallen to him whether he wanted it or not, and rivals were circling to take it while he was young and unproven. He had come to that hotel because it was forgettable, because he needed one anonymous night before he disappeared into a war he did not expect to survive. He had left before dawn not because the night meant nothing, but because he had convinced himself that anyone who stood near him would end up a target. He had spent 4 years abroad, buried in blood and business, becoming exactly the cold thing the world now feared. I told myself I left to protect you, he said, staring at the road. The truth is, I ran because that was the first time in my life I felt something, and I did not know how to hold it without breaking it. So I broke it early, on purpose. It seemed kinder. And then he told me the thing I never expected. He had gone back. 2 years later, when the war had quieted, he had returned to that hotel by the water to find the night desk clerk with the tired eyes. It was closed. Demolished. A parking structure stood where the flickering sign had been. He had asked around. No one remembered a girl named, well, he never had my name. He had nothing to search for but a face and a storm. He gave up. He decided the one honest night of his life had been a thing he had imagined, and he let the ice close over it for good. He never told anyone he had gone looking. He never told anyone about the storm. He never told anyone that in the bottom drawer of a desk in a house full of guns, there was a photograph he had taken of the flooded street outside that hotel, the only sentimental object a man like him had allowed himself to own, because it was the last place he had felt like a person instead of a name. I sat in that car with our sleeping son between us, and 4 years of a story I thought I understood turned completely inside out. I had believed a man used me and vanished. The truth was a frightened young man had touched something real, decided he was poison, and spent 4 years mourning a woman he could not even name, while she raised his son 20 minutes from his door. I did not forgive him that night. Forgiveness is not that fast, but I stopped hating him. And in my experience, that is a far more dangerous place to stand. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, because the hardest part is coming, take 1 second to tell me in the comments. Would you have gotten in that car? A frightened man, a sleeping son, a fortress you never asked for. I have thought about that choice every day since. Let me know where you'd have stood. And stay with me, because the danger I told you about was already turning its head in our direction, and it had just learned my son's name. What I did not know, sitting in that car with a key to nothing and a son between us, was that a plain gray car had already parked across the street from my old apartment, and the man inside it had a photograph in his pocket and a plan that did not care whose child it used. The house was exactly what you would imagine and colder. High ceilings, no photographs, no softness anywhere, as if the man who lived there had removed every surface a feeling could land on. Leo changed all of it inside a day. I woke the next morning to the sound of my son laughing somewhere in that enormous house, and I followed it, terrified, and found Leo sitting on the floor of a marble study driving his red car across the shoes of the most feared man in 3 states, and Adriano Ferraro, who I am told had once made a grown enforcer weep with a single sentence, was on the floor beside him building a garage out of law books. He looked up at me in the doorway, and for one unguarded second his face was so open it hurt to see. Then the ice came back, out of habit, out of armor, but we both knew I had seen it. The days that followed taught me who Adriano Ferraro was when the cameras and the enemies were not watching, and it was nothing the city would have believed. He did not know how to be a father, so he did it the way he did everything, with total, ferocious attention. He learned that Leo would not eat crusts and cut them off without a word. He learned that Leo was afraid of the dark hallway to the bathroom and, without ever mentioning it, had a small lamp installed there by morning. When Leo woke screaming from a nightmare on the second night, it was Adriano who reached him first, and I stood in the doorway and watched the most feared man in 3 states sit on the floor of a child's room in the dark, holding a boy who was not yet his by law, saying over and over in a low, rough voice, "I've got you. Nothing gets past me. I've got you." He did not know I was watching. He was not performing. He was just a man who had found something he would burn the world to keep. But there were harder moments too, and I want to be honest about them, because a man does not unlearn a lifetime in a week. One afternoon, Leo wandered too far in the garden, and Adriano could not find him for 90 seconds. And I watched terror do something to that controlled face that I never want to see again. And when Leo turned up behind a hedge, laughing, Adriano's first instinct was to build a wall, cameras, a man on the grounds, a rule about where Leo could go. I found him in his study that night pricing a fence high enough to cage a small boy inside his own childhood, and I sat down across from him and said, "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Trying to make him safe by making him small." I leaned forward. "You cannot love him from behind a wall you build out of your own fear. He'll grow up thinking the world is a thing that hunts him because his father couldn't tell the difference between protecting a child and imprisoning one. I know that difference costs you something. Pay it anyway." He stared at the fence plans for a long time. Then he folded them once, twice, and dropped them in the fire. It was the second thing I ever watched him choose to burn, and it was harder for him than the first. That night, after Leo was asleep, Adriano found me on the terrace. He had a folder in his hand, and I felt my whole body go cold because I knew what folders meant to men like him. "My lawyers drew this up," he said. "Full custody arrangement, my name on his birth certificate, my protection, my estate." He set it on the table between us. It would make him a Ferraro, untouchable, provided for the rest of his life. I looked at the folder and I felt every one of the $4 in my account. I felt the winter coming and Leo's shoes with the hole in them. I understood exactly what he was offering and exactly what it would cost. He was offering to make my son safe and rich and to fold us both into his world, where a man's love and a man's ownership were the same signature on the same page. "And me?" I asked. "Where am I in your folder?" He was quiet. "Because I know how this works," I said. "You lost him for 4 years, and now you'll never risk losing him again. So you'll build a beautiful cage, and you'll put my son in it. And you'll put me in it beside him because he cries without me, and you'll call it protection. And every day he'll grow up watching his mother live in a house she cannot leave, loving her son through the bars of a favor. I raised him free, Adriano, poor but free. I will not trade his freedom for his safety and call that a gift." He looked at me for a long time, and then Adriano Ferraro, the cold man, the ice man, the man who bought a building to fire a waitress, did the thing I did not think he had left in him. He picked up the folder, and he did not hand it to me. He tore it in half. Then, "Help me find another way," he said quietly. "One where he's safe, and you're free. I don't know how to do that. I have never in my life protected something without owning it. Teach me." That was the moment the ice actually broke. Not when Leo called him Dad now. When a man who had only ever known how to possess asked a poor woman to teach him how to let something be free and still keep it close. Salvatore Greco did not wait long. 3 days later, a car followed Grace, my friend from the restaurant, as she left her shift, slow, deliberate, letting her see it. That night, my old apartment was broken into. Nothing taken, everything moved, a message with no words. We know where the small ones live. And the next morning, a plain envelope arrived at Adriano's gate with a single photograph inside. Leo, in the restaurant, mid-run, the lion cufflink bright in his fist, and one line on the back. "A man with a son has a price. Name yours, Ferraro, or I'll name it for you." I have never seen a person go as still as Adriano went, looking at that photograph. It was not the stillness of fear. It was the stillness of a man deciding exactly how far he was willing to go, and finding there was no bottom to it. Here is what he did not do. He did not lock us deeper in the house. He did not take Leo somewhere and hide him from me. He did not use the danger as an excuse to sign the folder he had torn. Here is what he did. He sat me down at his own kitchen table, spread out everything he knew about Greco, and he treated me, a waitress with $4, as the mother of his son and an equal in the room. He told me the truth of the risk, all of it, no softening. And then he asked me what I wanted to do, and he waited for my answer before he moved. Greco had made one mistake. He believed Adriano's weakness was the child. He was wrong. The child had not made Adriano weak. The child had given a man who had nothing left to lose something to protect. And there is nothing more dangerous in this world than a cold man who has finally found a reason to feel the cold. There was one night in the middle of it I have never fully told anyone. Greco made a move to catch Leo alone. He had learned our new routine, the park on Tuesdays, 10 in the morning, Grace pushing the stroller so I could sleep off a night shift. That Tuesday, 2 men in a gray car were waiting by the park gate before we were. What Greco did not know was that Adriano had learned my routines too, and had quietly folded them inside his own protection without ever once telling me to change them, because he had promised me a life that was not a cage, and he had decided to keep that promise even when it terrified him. So when the gray car doors opened, the 2 men found 4 of Adriano's own already standing between them and my son, and Tomas, 63 years old, a dish towel still tucked in his belt, standing directly in front of the stroller, with his arms crossed like an old wall that had decided today was not the day. Nobody drew anything. In that world, the message is the muscle. The gray car understood it was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and it left. And Leo never even woke from his nap. And I did not learn any of it had happened until 3 days later, because Adriano had protected my son without stealing my morning, without turning our lives into a bunker, without making me a prisoner of his fear. That, more than anything he ever said, is how I knew he had actually changed. But it also meant it was time to end it. You cannot live at the edge of a man like Greco forever. Sooner or later, he stops sending messages and starts sending consequences. I will not walk you through every move of the days that followed, because some of it belongs to a world I only ever stood at the edge of. I will tell you the shape of it. Adriano did not go to war in the street where a child could be caught in it. He went to war in rooms full of paper and old debts and older loyalties the quiet way, the way that ends a man like Greco without a single window breaking. He called in 4 years of favors earned in blood. He made it so that by the end of the week, the men who had smiled at Greco's table would not return his calls, and the leverage Greco thought he held, one photograph of one small boy, was worth nothing, because Adriano had made himself worth more to everyone who mattered than Greco could ever threaten to take. And on the last night of it, he came to Greco not as a rival, but as a father. And he said one sentence that Tomas, who somehow, impossibly, was there driving, because that old man had adopted all 3 of us by then, swears he will never forget. "You put a child's face in an envelope," Adriano said. "You will spend the rest of your small life understanding that you chose the one man who no longer has a limit." Greco left the city before the month was out. He was never a problem again, and Adriano came home and knelt down in the hallway and let a 4-year-old crash into his chest, and closed his eyes like a man who had walked a very long way to reach exactly this spot on the floor. You would think that is where it ends. Danger gone, family together, ice melted. That is where these stories usually end. The powerful man opens his arms, and the poor woman walks in, grateful, and the door closes on a golden life. That is not how ours ended, and it is the reason I can tell it without shame. A week after Greco was gone, Adriano asked me to walk with him. Not in his house, in the city, in the rain, because it is always raining in the important moments of my life. He took me back to the water, to the parking structure that stood where a flickering hotel sign used to be, and he stopped there and reached into his coat. He did not take out a folder. He did not take out a ring. He took out a key. "There's an apartment," he said. "3 streets from my house, close enough that I can reach Leo in 4 minutes if the world ends. Far enough that it's a door only you can open." He put the key in my hand and closed my fingers around it. "It's in your name. Not mine, not his, yours. There is no clause, there is no cage. If you want me in your life, you'll come to me. If you want me only in his, I'll be a father and nothing more, and I will never once make you feel the cost of that. And if you want to take our son and leave this city entirely," his voice caught, one hairline fracture, "I will make sure you are safe wherever you go, and I will not follow." For a moment, I could not speak. 4 years of doing the math alone at kitchen tables, of choosing which bill to pay and which to hide under my son's drawings, of smiling through doubles and crying in freezers. And now a man was standing in the rain, handing me the one thing all that money had never been able to buy me back: the right to choose freely. I had forgotten what it weighed. It weighed almost nothing in my hand, that little key, and it undid me more than any diamond could have. "Why the water?" I asked him. "Why here?" He looked at the gray river. "Because this is where I felt like a person for one night 4 years ago, and then spent 4 years convincing myself I imagined it." He turned to me. "I did not imagine it. He's asleep in my house with a brass lion in his fist, and I have been given a second chance I did not earn and do not deserve. I'm not going to spend it caging the only 2 people who ever made me want to be more than a name." Then he reached into his other pocket and held something out on his open palm, the cufflink, the lion. Leo had pressed it into his hand that morning and told him, "You keep the shiny now, Dad. I have 2 arms. I don't need it. You only have the sad face." Adriano held it out to me. "He gave it back to me," he said. "The one honest thing I ever left behind. I want you to hold it. Not because I'm asking you for anything, because for 4 years you carried it when I couldn't carry anything at all. It was always more yours than mine." I did not take the cufflink. Instead, I closed his fingers back over it, the way he had closed mine over the key. "Keep it," I said. "You'll need something in your hand the first time you drop him off at school and have to drive away and let him be free of you for 6 whole hours. Get used to it. That's the whole job. Holding on and letting go at the same time." He laughed. I had never heard him laugh. It was a rough, unused sound, like a door that had been shut too long finally swinging open. We did not fall into each other's arms. It was not that kind of night, and we were not those kinds of people. I took my son back to an apartment with my name on the door. I unpacked our 2 suitcases and our $4, which was somehow still all I had, and I put Leo to bed in a room that was ours because I chose it, not because a powerful man permitted it. And in the morning, at 8 o'clock, there was a knock. I opened the door myself. Adriano stood in the hallway with 2 coffees and a small paper bag, and he did not step inside. He waited on the threshold, on my side of nothing, holding out the coffee, letting me be the one to decide whether the day let him in. Leo appeared at my knee, shiny in his fist, and looked up at the tall man in the doorway and grinned. "You came," he said. Same 2 words, different world. "I'll always come," Adriano said, "but I'll wait out here until your mom says." And he looked at me, Not with ice, not with ownership, with a question, and he waited. I took the coffee. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us rushed. Neither of us claimed. Behind us, the city kept moving. Enemies kept scheming. The rain kept falling on a river that had once held the only honest night of a cold man's life. And a 4-year-old with a brass lion decided the tall, sad man could come in now, and pulled him over the threshold by one finger into a small apartment with a mother's name on the door. The only door in the whole city that a Ferraro could not buy, could not break, and had learned at last to knock on. For most of my life, I believed that safety and freedom were two different countries, and that a poor woman had to pick one and give up her passport to the other. I believed love, when it finally came, would come the way it always seemed to for women like me, as a rescue, with a price, with a locked golden door and a man on the outside holding the only key. But love did not arrive that way. It arrived as a 4-year-old running across a marble floor toward the last man on earth who expected to be chosen. It arrived as a cold man tearing a folder in half and asking a waitress to teach him how to hold something without a cage. It arrived as a key placed in my own hand, in the rain, by a man who finally understood that the only love worth keeping is the kind you leave the door unlocked for. Adriano did not save me. He did not sweep in and fix my $4 and my thin walls and my tired hands. He did something harder and rarer. He handed me back my own choices, one at a time, and then he waited on the threshold in the hallway, on my side of nothing, for me to decide whether to let him in. Sometimes love does not arrive like a rescue. Sometimes it walks in out of a storm you never expected to survive, leaves one honest thing behind, and comes back 4 years later, not to take your world from your hands, but to kneel down on the wet marble, look up at everything it lost, and finally, quietly, learn how to knock.